Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rise TV on Rise Digital. This is Kate Wiegmann. I'm the COO of Rise Collaborative, and we are in for such a treat today because with me I have Julie Holunga, who is a member out of our Denver location. Julie is a leadership trainer and executive coach, developing professionals to lead with influence and authority. Julie, thank you so much for being here with me today to talk about an incredibly important topic, communication.
Thank you.
Of course, communication is a challenge under any circumstance. But given the changing nature of the way we are all working and living, both currently and into the future, there are new challenges that we're all needing to, as leaders and professionals, learn to adapt to. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring you in to give us all a few tips and tricks to help understand the whys and then also the hows that we can all be better communicators. Sure. Well, so one of the things that I've noticed now that I'm spending more and more time behind a Zoom camera is, for me, humor is often a coping mechanism and a tool that I will use often when I'm a little bit nervous or trying to really loosen up a room. And in the real world, that worked really well for me. But I can distinctly remember a few early Zooms where you make a joke or you're trying to kick things off and it falls totally flat. And then that just shakes my energy too. So I would love to know, A, am I alone? Or is it just a really bad joke? Am I not as funny as I think that I am? Or is there something else really at play going on here?
Yeah, well, you speak the truth. There is a screen, there is a barrier in front of us, and you're not alone in that example of what works in person doesn't necessarily translate across a screen and through a camera. We're not sitting on a Hollywood production set and with a laughing audience clapping on cue. And it's really very important for everyone to think that it is not simply translating the mode of delivery, that it is very different than we've been used to. And for some people, I remember very early on people saying, well, we need to connect. People really want to connect. We have to give all this opportunity to connect. And for myself and for other people that I know, my clients, and they did not want one more webinar, Zoom call, Zoom happy hour. I mean, just kind of, we're done with that. And
the fatigue.
The fatigue, and it's real. And there's an article, I think it was in Psychology Today, talking about Zoom fatigue. And this was, a month into quarantine. Yeah. So paying attention to what people need and how they need to receive it is imperative. Yeah. So when I think about this from a communication standpoint, it's really understanding who your audience is and what their needs are in terms of receiving information. So we talk about this from an emergenetics standpoint, which you and I did.
We do. Well, actually, before we jump into that, for people who aren't familiar with emergenetics, you actually worked with the Rise team a few months ago to really help us, do emergenetic profiles on ourselves and then really understand how that helps and how to optimize the way our team works. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, what emergenetics is and what your experience, why you love it, why you are also such a qualified person to talk with us about communication and personalities.
Sure. So emergenetics is a psychometric assessment tool that's been around since the early 90s and examines the way people prefer to think and behave. So it really simplifies human connection. And so it helps us understand who we're talking to, helps us understand when they behave a certain way, what that actually means, and allows for us not to make assumptions, or can help us not make assumptions. Yeah. And what I find so powerful, and there's so many great tools out there, what I love about it, it takes away any pigeonholing or putting people inside a box. So there's so many tools out there, as I said, that are so great. I used one early on in my career that identified I'm an extrovert. 100%, I get my energy from other people.
Yeah.
Although as I've gotten older, I really like my alone time.
Yeah.
But what I couldn't understand for myself was I was told that at 22, you're an extrovert, you get energy from people. You're going to be great getting out there and talking to people. For me, it's very hard to go into a conference or a networking event where there are hundreds and hundreds of people and break into a conversation. Hi, my name's Julie. I have learned how to do it. I have gained some comfort in it. It's exhausting to me.
Yeah.
And so if I just look at a tool that says you're an extrovert, that doesn't make sense to me.
Totally.
With emergenetics, it just goes a few levels deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So what shows up is that I do have a preference in social thinking, meaning I love to collaborate with people. I also have a preference where it shows up that I'm an extrovert. I'm an external processor. If I have an idea, I'm going to call you up and say, hey, let's talk this through.
Yeah.
But what else it shows is that I am more of a peacekeeper and that I operate at a gentler pace. Mm-hmm. So that's the big distinguisher why I'm not comfortable to go to a conference and break into a conversation of people. I find it very awkward. I do it. Yeah. I teach other people how to do it. I know I need to do it, but I don't love it. And so, from that, I figured out what does work for me. So that's what I really love about this tool is that it exemplifies that we need diversity of thought. And I would say, having cognitive diversity on top of every other aspect, gender, race, experience, it's so important for teams to communicate effectively, to be innovative, to be able to solve complex problems. You need to have diversity of thought. And at Emergenetics, we call it having a we team, which is a whole Emergenetics team, so that you're approaching things from every different angle. You're having that cognitive diversity. You're having a diversity of behaviors. I mean, imagine we have some good friends from college who, one of the coaches at our school said, when the two of you are together, who listens? Because they both were such talkers.
Yeah.
And that makes for a really good point. If you're on a team and everyone wants to go 1,000 miles a minute, who's stepping back and thinking, wait, hold on, is this aligned with our vision? Are we taking our customers in mind? Do we have the full process considered? And what other possibilities could we be thinking about if everyone's just charging full steam ahead?
Totally.
So having that balance.
Well, for sure. And I was going to say, sorry to interrupt, I was when it comes to emergenetics, you know a thing or two about it. You are one of just 30 master emergenetics trainers in the world.
Yes.
Not in the state, not in the country, in the world, which is incredible. Yeah. And truly, as I said, you worked with the RISE team, and it truly has transformed the way that we understand each other, and then the way that we approach, whenever we want to start a new project, or where we want to, when we're looking at a challenge, anytime we notice maybe there's a miscommunication or energy or something goes up, we are literally able to step back, and we now have tools and processes, and we're on a mutual playing field understanding, thanks to your help, for understanding why is this.
Right. Right.
And so it's a really, really powerful tool, which I'm excited about and grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I always recommend to people. So, people can take away today. It's to start paying attention to the people you work with and your spouses or partners or roommates. What are the kinds of questions that they're asking? Are they always asking a question around why? So Kate, I know your daughter's 2.5. She's probably asking a lot of why questions right now. So yeah, that's a little bit different. But if someone's asking a lot of why questions, they want proof and they want examples and they want research by reliable sources, know to give them that information even before they ask. Yeah. But they might be asking, how are we going to execute this? What's the process? What are some guidelines? What's the system? Then they have a structural mindset. Give them that information. But maybe you notice that they're always asking, what's the impact on our members? What's the impact on our customers, on our employees? That you start paying attention to those kinds of questions that they're asking, so that you can deliver that information to them to be an effective communicator, but also to de-escalate any miscommunication, which leads to conflict, and just to almost get ahead of any misunderstanding that could happen when we're working, especially when we're working with a screen in between us.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you said, misunderstandings, it happens every day, in personal life and professional life. How does that play out in a virtual or a more remote environment?
Yeah, well, I see it a lot in behaviors, right? So before we got on, we were joking around about kind of, well, like you said, a joke that didn't land, right? So I recently did a training a couple days ago, and I finished off this training, which with a story which I think is hysterical. And I've, in person, I get a lot of laughs from it.
Yeah.
So I deliver it. It's on Zoom. There's 50, tiny little boxes on my screen, and I tell the story, and everyone's muted, right?
Oh, awkward. Oh no. Yeah.
Right. And so I tell the story, and it's just nothing. And I know it's a funny story, but I could start telling myself so many stories in my own head that didn't land. They don't like me. I'm not good at what I do. That bombed, right? And that steamrolling effect of, oh my God, I suck, right?
Yeah.
That's not the case at all. Everyone was muted because I did that before, right when quarantine started. And thankfully, the conference organizer had forgotten to mute her phone or her line. So she was unmuted. So I got to hear her laugh, which was,
good.
it was great. Yay. But this idea that, when I'm looking at your face, I mean, your face right now is maybe 3 inches, but, normally when you have tons of people on a call and it's an inch big, I can see you, but I really can't read what's going on for you. But even understanding, that sometimes people just process information differently. So one of the key things that I say to you, so you just nodded your head. So that tells me, oh, Kate agrees with what I'm saying. Kate is interested in what I have to say.
Yeah.
But you may still be interested in what I have to say and not nod your head. So that is my husband to a T. And so I now know that I may pose a question to him, or I might tell him something and not get a reaction. And it's not because he's not listening, and it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he's processing internally. So we have to take a step back and understand that people transmit information differently, process that information differently. And when people understand where they fall, I often give the tip that if you are an internal processor, so you think to speak, that you say to someone, that is a great question. Can I come back to you? Or I have to think about that one. I'll get back to you tomorrow morning. That kind of thing. If you notice that you have someone on your team who is an internal processor, if you want them to report back on a particular project or something to do with a client, make sure you let them know in advance. And advance could mean 5 minutes. It could be, the meeting's about to start. Ideally, you don't want to do that. You want to give them some time.
Yeah.
But let them gather their thoughts is often the term that I hear my clients saying. So they don't feel that they're being put on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And similarly, like
to that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. On the other end of the spectrum is someone who's an external processor. Make sure that they have a chance to speak and to process their thoughts out loud, because otherwise they will feel less engaged. They'll feel that their role doesn't matter. There are all kinds of things that can start to play in our heads that lead to miscommunication, that lead to ineffective communications.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like assumptions and like these stories that we tell ourselves. I mean, again, coming back to communication, it's like either sharing more and realizing that not everyone thinks, operates the same way that you do.
Exactly. And I've heard that, like, I mean, that's the biggest thing. We talked about it before, what I call the titanium rule, right? Speaking to others, communicating with others the way they need to be spoken to. Also thinking through of, just because someone's different and responds a different way, don't make that assumption. We know what happens when we assume, but to really think through. To do away with assumptions, and I feel like I've said this line probably every day for the last 3 months, to just practice some grace with ourselves and with others, and understanding that when you communicate, a lot of times you just need to say, like my favorite question to ask is, tell me more. So if someone if you find yourself starting to make assumptions, to step back and say, all right, tell me more about that. And
Yeah.
that's it. That's all you have to say. And it's really, it brings that person in. It makes them feel that you care about them. You're practicing empathy, which we all know is so essential to leading.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And because I was going to ask, I was like, so when it comes to conflict, are you generally of the mindset that whether it's caused by virtual and misunderstandings, I mean, I guess conflict is usually always caused by a misunderstanding or difference of opinion, but addressing it in the moment or taking a break and coming back to it, I guess, does it depend sometimes, or is it really better? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it totally depends. So the delayed response is a tactic. I always say definitely delay your response when you feel your emotions are running high, right? If you're feeling, I remember going to a pediatrician once and doing this, like just being so frustrated. If you're feeling that, don't not have a conversation, because you're not able to, like when I talk about conflict, there are two ways to approach it, and only one is the right way. To make it simple.
Oh, well, at least there's at least there is. You tell, yes.
Yeah. So the ineffective way is to be on a destructive path where you're focused on the person, and that's typically when emotions are running high, and you did this to me, and I'm being, screwed in some way, or, it's not. There's a lot of the person to person or personality difference.
Totally.
That's not the way to go.
I see that.
On the other hand, right? On the other hand, we have the constructive path, which is you're focused on the task, you're focused on the problem, and you are optimistic that a solution can be found. That's where we want to live when it comes to conflict. So a delayed response to allow you to be on that constructive path, I'm all for it. The tip that I give people is to set a deadline. It may be a deadline that you announce, hey, Kate, I don't want to talk about this right now. Let me get my thoughts together. Let's talk tomorrow. So you give that deadline, or to just say, I'm going to come back to you about this. And you don't necessarily need to announce the deadline of tomorrow, but for yourself, you have that deadline. Because for the thousands and thousands of people that I have coached and trained around dealing with conflict, and the research I've done and the training I've done around conflict, what I know is that misunderstanding is the precursor to conflict. So if you can stay and not in misunderstanding and not let it escalate to conflict, everyone is better off. What I hear, though, from all those people is that avoidance, fear, the flight or fight response comes into play. And then that delayed response turns into avoidance. And when you stick your head in the sand, you're not dealing with conflict. And a lot of people, in the natural sense, we were all taught that conflict is a bad thing, and it's not. So if you can use your effective communication skills to de-escalate, you're not going to do away with conflict, and you don't want to. It can be a positive thing when you deal with it correctly. So really check in with yourself, like, am I avoiding this person because I don't want to deal with this conflict? And be honest with yourself. And just start the conversation, and try to stay focused on the task or the problem at hand, not the interpersonal issues that may exist.
Well, it's so smart. And gosh, I'm like just thinking through people that I've had conflicts or misunderstandings with, where it was handled in version 1 and then also in version 2. And you're right, we're never going to be able to avoid conflict. And sometimes some of the best growth and the best outcomes come out of conflict.
Exactly.
And it's funny because, they say some of the best teams are filled with people who disagree and they see things completely differently. And that can cause conflict. But if you handle it in a healthy and constructive way, really beautiful things can come out of it. That's really, I'm going to sit on that for a little bit.
That's exactly it. And you don't want to be, Kate, as a leader yourself, you don't want to be surrounded by people who are just saying yes to everything that you put out there.
Absolutely. The other thing it makes me think about too, especially in times of conflict, but in general as well, is listening.
Yes.
And, often I think it's easy for us to be thinking about what we're going to say next. And especially, as you said, if emotions are running high, if we're in conflict, but then even still, if you're telling a story or you're just catching up with someone, if you're thinking about this, I often will get on my husband about, you're thinking about what you're going to you're not even listening to what I just said. Is that, in all those situations I can see happening, and the importance of listening in
Yeah.
communication.
Totally. And the sign of a good leader, right? How do you demonstrate empathy? How do you engage people? How do you motivate people? How do you influence people if you're not listening, right? So I look at listening at 3 levels. So the first level is you say something while you're talking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share this quick story with you. We have a good friend we've known. He was the MC at our wedding. We've known him forever. And I specifically remember, 15 years ago, telling him how I'd gotten last minute tickets to a Red Sox game, second row, right behind the on deck circle. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's just this amazing experience. Beers were being brought to me, popcorn, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And as I'm talking to him, I can tell from his facial expressions, he was chomping at the bit, just waiting for me to stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like, all right, he's not listening anymore. I stopped talking, and he wanted to tell me how he had read a book about the Red Sox, which is great.
Of course. But,
fascinating. I ended up reading the book too. But the point was, I'm telling you about this amazing experience I had.
Yeah.
So anyone who thinks that they can get away with that, no one can tell that you're on your phone while you're on a Zoom call, or that you're not listening, you're fooled.
Totally.
So that's level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Level 2 is where you're listening to the other person. You're listening to their voice. You're very much outside your own head. That's a great place to live. Mm-hmm. Level 3 is really just top notch. That's where you're paying attention to everything going around. Mm-hmm. You're listening to different intonations in their voice. Mm-hmm. You're listening for a pause. You're listening for maybe they're getting emotional, or when we're in person, maybe you notice that their eyes start to tear up. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you pay attention to, they really have a huge grin on their face, and then you respond to that, right? So whether that's, I see that you're getting emotional, or you seem really excited about this. Yeah. And so the listening is not just on the words coming out of their mouth, but everything going around them. Mm. And that. Yeah.
Sorry. I was going to say, sorry. I swear I was listening. I was thinking though, here I am thinking like, gosh, my next question is, is that something that's learned or innate? Because I think about some people who it is just a little bit harder, they're, just social skills, or, being able to social emotional intelligence, or your EI, I guess too, emotional intelligence. Being a little bit innate. And so is that something that one can influence in themselves?
Yeah. So, when I think about leadership in general, I think leaders are made. Mm-hmm. There are some people who are just more natural. Maybe it comes a little bit easier to them, but the skills and being a great leader can be learned. So same thing with being a good listener. You may think of yourself as being a good listener, but what I found both personally when I learned about this through my own training, and then being able to share that with clients, when they're able to truly understand what does it mean to be a good listener, it ups their game. So yeah, I think there are some people who more naturally are a good listener. My mom is a phenomenal listener. I think just being a mom, it comes with the role, but you can always improve that game. So I think it's having the EQ to understand, I'm not being a good listener right now. I am thinking about what I want to say next. Mm-hmm. As you're interviewing, of course, you're thinking about the next thing you're going to ask. That's okay. But really, as leaders, I find it so imperative. If you are not a good listener, you might not be at that level 3 all the time, but if you can live at level 2 99% of the time, it's phenomenal. And I see a lot of times in my work, it's just people just want to be heard. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. This is gonna maybe be a random reference, but do you ever watch the TV show Parenthood?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, one of my like very favorite
Yes.
TV series of
Yes.
all time. And my husband and our entire family, we use after they went through marriage counseling, I see you.
I
And,
hear you.
and it's so helpful though to
Yes.
people want to be seen, heard, and
Yeah.
valued. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
makes you feel valued is that you're important.
Yes.
Isn't it? So hearing, listening, paying attention, being present, and valuing
Exactly.
your time together for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard on this podcast recently talking about leadership, whether it's remote, you have a team in India, or it's quarantine working from home, that when you are leading, truly leading effectively, you are present right then and there.
Mm.
So you're putting your phone down, you're not checking emails, you're not thinking about something else, you're not reviewing a document while trying to talk to someone. And it's so funny to me to think that a tip around leadership is put your phone away.
But yeah.
But it really is, and it really lands with people. They feel it, and people really are hungry for that. I would say more so than anything else is they just, as you said, they want to be heard and they want that connection in a true and genuine way.
Absolutely. Oh, well, Julie, I see you and I hear you. Seriously, this has been so, I mean, I can't even begin to list the number of impactful, tangible, put into action tomorrow kind of advice and insights that you shared with me and all of our viewers today. Thank you.
This was
Um,
really fun, Kate.
Oh my gosh, this was every time I get to spend with you is a ton of fun, but then I always find myself thinking about it days, weeks, months later and repeating just the incredible insight. So thank you. And I'm
Thank
sure all of
you.
our viewers will feel that as well. So, friend, it was great to be with you today, and I look forward to seeing you virtually or in person, hopefully very soon.
Yes. Thank you, Kate.
Julie. Bye.